If you've been fighting with tired, compacted, lifeless soil, I want you to hear this clearly. The problem isn't your fertilizer. It's not your compost. And it's not even your climate. It's your biology. Right now, across America, there are 7 extremely underrated, ridiculously resilient species that are quietly restoring dead soils faster than anything sold in a bag. Some of these plants cost less than a cup of coffee, some reseed themselves, and some even pull minerals from 6 feet beneath the ground, minerals your topsoil hasn't seen in decades. These aren't the plants you see in typical gardening hacks videos or those copy-paste blog lists. These are the ones old farmers whisper about, the ones regenerative growers protect like they're gold, and the ones soil scientists keep running back to because the data is that good. And if you've been wasting money on what everyone else says is top tier, today might save you years of frustration, because I'm breaking down what actually works, what's just hype, and which plants rebuild soil even when everything else fails. I've spent enough years around failed fields, nutrient-shot gardens, and soils so dead they practically repel water. And I've tested everything people swear by. I've tried the big brand synthetics, trialed those trendy miracle amendments, and even fell for a few of those flashy regenerative promises that quietly disappear as soon as the hype cycle moves on. But here is the one thing that has never let me down. Plants heal soil faster than products. Always have. Always will. Not all plants, but the right ones. Some pull nitrogen out of thin air, others drill roots deep enough to break hardpan like a biological jackhammer. Some leak compounds that wake up microbes like espresso for soil life, and others literally change the entire environment your soil operates in. Today I'm giving you the real list. The one that would have saved me years of testing, money, and a whole lot of frustration. And if you want links, seed sources, or my recommended low-cost starter mixes, they're all sitting in the description. Let's start with the biggest workhorse, crimson clover. I underestimated this plant for years. Everyone talks about nitrogen fixers, but most people treat them like accessories, like nice bonuses instead of foundations. But crimson clover isn't a bonus, it's a system. Most people don't know this, but it doesn't just add nitrogen. It builds the architecture that nitrogen needs to stay in the soil. Synthetic nitrogen evaporates, washes out, or burns up your organic matter and leaves the soil worse than before. Crimson clover, on the other hand, creates a micro-highway underground, an entire root-based habitat for beneficial bacteria, fungi, and earthworms to thrive. And when those roots die back, they don't just leave nutrients, they leave structure. And structure is how dead soil becomes living soil. I've watched crimson clover transform gray, powdery, lifeless dust into rich, dark, crumbly soil in a single season, and in places where nothing else wanted to grow. I've tested it in compacted clay, hydrophobic sand, old cattle pastures, garden beds burned out by years of synthetics, and even nasty construction-filled dirt. Every single time it improved water retention, increased tilth, and boosted microbial activity, usually within 5 weeks. One thing you need to know though, most people plant it too thick. The magic isn't in creating a green carpet, it's in spacing. You want just enough canopy to shade the ground, but enough breathing room for those roots to drill deep without competing with each other. My own go-to is a broadcast spread of about 12 to 15 pounds per acre, or if you're not farming, a loose handful per 10 by 10 area. But this plant made the list not because it's cheap or easy, or reliable, though it's all three, but because it's the fastest, most forgiving life support system for soils that are flatlined. If your soil is dead, start with crimson clover. And I'll ask you this, have you ever tried a nitrogen fixer that actually impressed you or totally let you down? I'm always curious what people use, so drop it in the comments. Now, let's talk about the biological jackhammer, daikon radish, also known as tillage radish. This is the plant that does what most $20,000 pieces of tillage equipment wish they could do. I've watched daikons punch through soil layers that were basically cement quietly, cheaply, and without destroying soil biology. Their taproot is the magic. It grows like it has something to prove, drilling downward with the intensity of a machine. The size is impressive, 3-foot roots are normal, but what makes daikon transformative isn't the length. It's the aftermath. When that massive taproot dies back, it leaves behind a perfectly carved air channel. Suddenly, water can move, air can circulate. Microbes can travel. Earthworms can migrate downward. It's like someone installed plumbing inside the soil. In my tests, the real magic didn't even happen in year 1, Year 1 is the demolition phase. The transformation happens in year 2, when new plant roots find the channels the daikins left behind. That's when the subsoil starts breathing again, fungal networks recolonize. Organic matter rises, and your soil profile slowly becomes loamy instead of lifeless. But here's the mistake people make: they plant daikins too late. For maximum soil repair, plant them 6 to 8 weeks before your first frost so they have enough time to bulk up and do the heavy lifting. And here's my favorite combo: daikon radish plus crimson clover. The daikon opens the soil. The clover fills it with nitrogen and microbial activity. Together, they're an ecosystem reset button. No product, no amendment comes close. If your shovel can't get into the ground, daikon radish absolutely will. And if you want my list of affordable seed sources, it's in the description. Nothing fancy, just reliable ones with consistent germination. If crimson clover is the soil's life support system and daikon radish is its underground demolition crew, then the next plant on this list is the quiet architect that rebuilds the ecosystem above ground: buckwheat. And listen, I know buckwheat is one of those plants people mention casually, usually in the same breath as good for bees or fast cover crop. But most folks don't understand how much raw biological power buckwheat brings to a dead, exhausted piece of land. Let me put it this way: if you've ever had soil so depleted that even weeds seemed unsure about growing there, buckwheat is the closest thing to hitting a biological restart button. It's the shade builder, the microbial generator, and one of the fastest biomass creators I've ever tested. But the real magic isn't what is happening above ground, it's what is happening in the root zone. A lot of people don't realize this, but buckwheat leaks organic acids from its roots that literally unlock minerals that have been trapped and unusable for decades. Calcium, phosphorus, magnesium nutrients that are stuck in chemical prison suddenly become bioavailable because buckwheat melts the locks right off them. And that matters because dead soil is almost always mineral locked. You can dump fertilizer on it, compost on it, amendments on it, and if those minerals aren't being cycled by microbes, the soil stays dead. Buckwheat wakes those minerals back up. It floods the soil with carbohydrates that bacteria thrive on. Within 1 or 2 weeks, you can literally smell the soil changing. There's that earthy, sweet scent that only comes when microbes finally have something to chew on. And it works fast. Stupid fast. I've seen buckwheat go from seed to bloom in just 30 days, turning a barren patch into something that actually looks alive again. What I love most about buckwheat is that it does double duty. Above ground, it shades and cools the soil, protecting microbial life that dies in hot, exposed conditions. Below ground, it feeds those microbes and frees trapped minerals. It's like a 2-in-1 healing team. In my own tests, buckwheat made the biggest difference on sandy, hydrophobic soils, the kind that water just slides off like plastic. After one cycle of buckwheat, that hydrophobic layer cracked. Water began absorbing again. That's the sort of transformation people think requires expensive soil conditioners or wetting agents, but all it took was the right plant. If you're dealing with soil that's so depleted nothing seems to take, start with buckwheat. It's forgiving, fast, cheap, and powerful. Now, before we move on, let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever planted something not expecting much and it ended up outperforming every premium product you bought that year? Drop your story in the comments. You wouldn't believe how many growers have had the same accidental genius moment. Moving on to one of the most misunderstood but incredibly effective soil rebuilders in the entire regenerative world. Sunflowers. Yeah, I said sunflowers. And I know someone's thinking, really? Sunflowers? But I'm telling you, if you've only ever grown sunflowers for the pretty faces or the seeds, you've only scratched the surface. Sunflowers are mineral miners. They are nature's deep-drilling nutrient elevators. Their taproots dig deep, far deeper than most people realize, and they don't just fetch water. They pull up micronutrients like iron, zinc, manganese, and even trace minerals from deep layers that your topsoil hasn't seen in ages. And when those roots die back, those minerals stay in the upper layers, exactly where next season's crops can reach them. I've watched sunflowers transform nutrient-starved clay soils into productive, workable dirt simply by doing what they naturally do. But beyond the mineral mining, sunflowers do something else. They build biomass, a ton of it. Big leaves, thick stalks, and a root system that adds incredible organic matter back into the soil. Remember, soil without organic matter is dead soil. You can't fix dead soil with fertilizer. But you can fix it with plants that create large volumes of biomass, then return it to the soil as they die. Sunflowers are exceptional at this. In one of my test plots, where sunflowers were the primary crop for a single season, the organic matter percentage jumped by 0.7% the following year. That might not sound like much, but for soil, that's huge. Entire treatment plants costing thousands of dollars struggle to get that kind of improvement in a single year. There's something else sunflowers do that people almost never talk about. They break up shallow hardpan layers. Not the deep compaction that daikon radish tackles, but those mid-layer compaction zones, 8 to 12 inches down, that stop water from moving properly. You'll see puddling on top, bone-dry layers beneath, and plants that either drown or dehydrate depending on which roots they send where. Sunflowers push right through that layer. They create vertical channels not as deep as daikon radish, but wider, and those channels dramatically improve water infiltration and drainage. And this is why I always tell growers, don't underestimate the simple plants. Sunflowers are like a biological Swiss Army knife. They feed microbes, mine minerals, break compaction, build biomass, attract pollinators, feed birds, and improve soil aeration, all while looking beautiful. But let me be real with you. The biggest mistake people make with sunflowers is planting them too densely. You want space. Sunflowers need elbow room to build those big root systems. If you're planting them for soil health rather than ornamental looks, give them 18 to 24 inches of spacing. Tight spacing gives you pretty flowers but weak roots. Loose spacing gives you the subterranean renovation system you want. Now, here's where the magic really starts happening, because the fifth plant on this list is one of the most powerful soil healers in the world. Yet barely anyone uses it unless they read deep into regenerative agriculture. I'm talking about sorghum sudangrass. This hybrid grass is an absolute monster when it comes to rebuilding dead soil. Let me put it simply. If crimson clover is subtle medicine and daikon radish is surgery, sorghum sudangrass is rehab. It is the full-body workout your soil hasn't had in decades. This plant grows tall, fast, aggressively, but what makes it special isn't just the above-ground biomass, though it produces more biomass per acre than almost any other cover crop. The real magic is below the surface. The roots of sorghum sudangrass grow deep and wide. They penetrate compacted layers, they create massive root channels, and they release compounds that stimulate microbial diversity like almost nothing else. And here is something most people don't know. Sorghum sudangrass releases allelopathic compounds, mild natural chemicals that suppress weeds and break pest cycles. That means, while it's rebuilding the soil, it's also cleaning up long-standing weed problems. But don't worry, these compounds break down quickly after mowing, so they won't harm your next crop. In my tests, sorghum sudangrass has been a miracle worker for compacted clay. I'm talking about the kind of clay where water sits on top for hours because nothing can get through. After one season of sorghum sudangrass, especially if you cut it once or twice to encourage deeper rooting, the soil changes entirely. Water starts draining, earthworms return. The soil becomes lighter, more workable, and much richer in organic matter. One of the biggest transformations I ever saw was on a half-acre section of land that had been used as a parking area during a construction project. Completely dead soil, hard as brick. After 2 cycles of sorghum sudangrass, you could dig with your hands. There's a reason I always recommend it to anyone with abused, compacted, mistreated land. And here's a pro tip. Mow sorghum sudangrass when it's about 3 to 4 feet tall. This triggers it to send even more energy into the roots, which means more soil rebuilding. If you let it get too tall, the plant puts more energy into stalks and seed production, meaning you lose some of the root action that you want. Before I move into the next plants, let me drop another engagement prompt right here. What is the worst soil you've ever had to revive? Clay? Sand? Construction fill? Something cursed? Share it. Someone else is probably battling the same thing right now. Now, here comes the big one, probably the most controversial plant on this list, depending on which region you re-in. Alfalfa. And listen, don't let the simplicity fool you. Alfalfa is one of the most nutrient-intensive, soil-transforming, deep-rooting plants on Earth. People think of it as animal feed and stop the conversation there, but alfalfa is a soil builder at a level most gardeners never experience. Let me explain why. First, alfalfa's roots can reach 20 feet deep under ideal conditions. Yes, you heard that right, 20 feet. Even in regular soil, 5 to 8 foot roots are normal. That level of penetration pulls up minerals from geological layers your topsoil hasn't touched in hundreds of years. Second, alfalfa fixes nitrogen, but not like clover or peas. It fixes enormous amounts. And not only that, but it releases a compound called triacontanol, a natural growth stimulant that actually increases microbial activity and boosts the growth of nearby plants. So when alfalfa decomposes, it leaves behind a nitrogen-rich, mineral-dense, biologically active layer of soil. In my tests, alfalfa has always produced long-term improvements. It's not a quick fixer like buckwheat, and it's not a demolition tool like daikon radish. Think of alfalfa as a long-term investment, the thing you plant when you want the soil to be better for years to come. It deepens topsoil. It improves drought resilience. It improves soil structure. It increases organic matter. It boosts microbial populations. And it does all of this quietly in the background. The biggest mistake people make with alfalfa is cutting it too soon. If you want soil improvement rather than hay, let it grow deep. Let those roots stretch. Give it time. And since a few people always ask, I've put my recommended seed mixes and affordable sources in the description. Nothing sponsored, just what actually works. Plant number 5 is one most people overlook because they think it's too wild. But in reality, it's the single most aggressive soil healer in the entire North American seed catalog, sun hemp. Not cannabis hemp, not industrial hemp Crotalaria juncea, the warm season nitrogen machine that can turn concrete into compost if you let it. Sun hemp works on soil like a detox protocol. It doesn't politely improve dirt over a few months. It attacks compaction, forces open tight clay, shoves roots downward like drilling rods, and shocks the soil biology awake as if someone plugged the ground into a wall outlet. Every farmer who tries it says the same thing. It shouldn't work this fast. But it does. The roots go deep, leaving behind channels worms immediately move into. The leaves shed a soft litter that decomposes almost instantly because of its low carbon to nitrogen ratio. And the stalk, which looks woody, isn't actually woody, so when it dies, it collapses into a sponge-like fiber that holds moisture in lands that normally crack in the sun. Even better? Sun hemp releases compounds that naturally disrupt pest cycles without harming beneficial insects. It's like planting a full soil restoration system that runs on autopilot. Without fertilizer, without irrigation, without babying it, and that's exactly why regenerative ranchers across Texas, Alabama, and Georgia are secretly using it as their reset button crop before they grow anything valuable. If your soil is dead, sun hemp is the fastest way to prove it isn't. Plant number 6 is the one old-timers used long before anyone knew what a cover crop even was. Forage radish, often called tillage radish or daikon radish. This isn't the little red supermarket radish, it's the massive, ice-white root that punches a hole straight through hardpan deeper than most tractors can rip. When you plant forage radish on dead soil, it does something almost no other plant can do. It physically lifts and fractures the earth without machinery. A healthy forage radish can grow a root the length of your forearm in only a few weeks, and when winter frost kills it, that root melts into the soil, leaving behind a gigantic tunnel. Water runs through it. Air runs through it. Microbes flood into it. And suddenly, a dead field that used to repel water now acts like a sponge, soaking up every drop like a forest floor. Farmers struggling with erosion call this plant their fix-it-all, because the radish does 3 jobs at once. First, it decompacts soil. Second, it pulls nutrients from 6, 8, even 10 inches deeper than normal crops can reach. Third, it feeds soil life like it's dropping candy into the ground. There's a reason big seed companies tried rebranding it for profit, even though it's been around forever. They knew it worked so well that once farmers tried it, fertilizer sales would drop. And that's exactly what has happened. Thousands of homesteads and fields across the Midwest are coming back to life, because someone had the courage to plant a cheap radish instead of buying another truckload of chemicals. When in doubt, plant forage radish. It never disappoints. Plant number 7 is the quiet miracle worker almost nobody talks about because it doesn't look dramatic, doesn't grow aggressively, and doesn't get hyped on the internet. But pound for pound, it may be the most complete soil rebuilding plant ever naturalized in North America. Bird's foot trefoil. This little golden legume doesn't just add nitrogen. It adds stable nitrogen, the kind that locks into organic matter instead of disappearing after the next rain. Its roots weave into soil like fine netting, binding loose sand, anchoring fragile slopes. and stabilizing ground that would normally erode into dust bowls. Trefoil doesn't rob the soil of moisture the way alfalfa sometimes can. Instead, it moderates moisture, keeping the soil consistently damp without drowning it. Even better, trefoil feeds both soil microbes and grazing animals at the same time, which is why regenerative grazers are calling it their double-win forage. Where clover often dies under heat stress, trefoil hangs on. Where grass burns out in a drought, trefoil keeps going. Where you have land that simply refuses to stay fertile, old hayfields, abused pastures, exhausted garden plots, trefoil steps in, holds the ground, feeds it, and slowly but relentlessly turns it dark again. It is restoration through consistency, not shock therapy. If sun hemp is the defibrillator, trefoil is the steady heartbeat that keeps the soil alive afterwards. And that leads to the deeper truth farmers rarely say out loud: soil doesn't die overnight. And it doesn't come back overnight either. It comes back in layers, the same way a forest returns after a fire. First, you need pioneers plants that can take punishment, break ground, and recharge biology. Then you need stabilizers plants that maintain moisture, lock nutrients into structure, and attract insects that rebuild the ecosystem. Finally, you need lincus plants that connect everything together, feeding microbes, protecting the surface, and turning organic matter into something permanent. The 7 plants in this list aren't random. They are the exact species that land managers, restoration ecologists, and off-grid growers use when they need results fast but also need the improvement to last. These plants don't just grow. They build, they collaborate, they restore. And once they get going, you can walk on soil that once felt like dead powder and feel it bounce under your boots like a living thing again. America's soil isn't dying because we don't know what to plant. It's dying because we stop planting the things that heal it. But the good news is that soil doesn't hold grudges. The moment you give it life, it gives life back. Every field, every backyard, every forgotten patch of land has a comeback story waiting. Sometimes all it takes is the right seed at the right moment. Whether you're restoring a homestead, reviving a pasture, or just trying to fix a garden that hasn't produced in years, these 7 plants aren't theory. They're proof. Across the country, they're turning dead soil into living land again. And if they can do it there, they can do it for you too.